Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ever wonder if, maybe a robot wrote that contract you just signed? Well, that might not be science fiction anymore. Today, we're looking at this really fascinating case where a defendant is claiming just that AI was used to create the contract at the center of a lawsuit.
Interesting.
Yeah, and get this, they're asking the court to force the other side to reveal exactly how much AI was used in the process.
Oh, wow. That's a bold move. It really raises some big questions about how our legal system is going to handle this whole AI thing. It's changing so
There's
fast.
a lot to keep up with. Okay, so let's break it down for everyone listening.
Yeah.
We know this defendant is facing a lawsuit, but they're not just saying, oh, I don't agree with the terms of the contract. They're going a step further, basically saying, wait a minute. We need to know if AI was involved in how this contract was even made.
Exactly. They're trying to peek behind the curtain, see what's really going on. In legal terms, they're asking the court to compel discovery, which means one side can request evidence from the other side, and they want that evidence to be specifically about how AI might have been used in creating the core parts of a contract.
So, are they trying to find out if an AI was involved in, making the offer or deciding what each side was agreeing to, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Think of it this way. They're trying to trace the contract all the way back to the beginning and see if there are any, digital fingerprints from an AI along the way.
That makes sense. So has this kind of strategy ever been used before? Have courts even dealt with this type of request?
There aren't that many cases specifically about AI's role in contracts yet. It's pretty new territory, legally speaking. But we can look at some other cases that have touched on AI in legal matters to get an idea of how courts have been approaching it so far.
Oh, okay. So what kind of cases are we talking about here?
Well, there's this one case, Kongu, where the plaintiff wanted access to the defendant's source code because they thought it was creating misleading ads. But the court basically said, hold on, you don't need to see the actual code itself to understand what the software is doing. We can just look at how it works and what it produces.
So they focused on the outcome, not necessarily the technology behind it. That's interesting.
Exactly. Then there's Libs versus Facebook, where people were saying that Facebook's algorithm for targeting ads was discriminatory. The court decided that even though the ads themselves were from third parties, Facebook's algorithm was part of how the content was created. So it wasn't automatically protected by the law that shields online platforms from being liable for what their users post.
So even though the ads were coming from other people, the way Facebook's algorithm was sorting and showing them still mattered. That makes sense.
Right. And all these cases show us that courts are still trying to figure out how our existing laws apply to this whole new world of technology.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's tough. But going back to our case, do you think this defendant's strategy of asking for all this transparency about AI is actually going to work?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? To figure that out, we need to look at some cases where courts actually had to take a close look at the technology behind the evidence being presented.
All right, let's do it. What do we got?
Okay, well, there's State versus Gigliotti. In that case, the court said they needed a hearing to decide if this new bullet matching technology was reliable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the defense wanted to see the algorithms the technology was using, right? And the court said, okay, maybe that's necessary, but they sent it back for more specific arguments.
So they didn't rule it out completely, but they wanted more explanation. Gotcha.
Right. And then there's State versus Pickett, this case in New Jersey, that involved some new DNA analysis software. So the court there basically said that denying access to the software's trade secrets, including the source code, would be like forcing the defendant to just blindly accept what the company was saying about how reliable their software is.
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't be fair at all. You should be able to challenge the evidence against you.
Exactly. And the court really emphasized how important transparency is, especially when you're dealing with a potentially groundbreaking new technology like this in a criminal trial. They even talked about getting opinions from the computer science community to make sure the software is actually reliable.
Interesting. So is that a good sign for our defendant who wants to know all about the AI behind their contract?
It could be, but there are also cases that show a more cautious approach to this whole thing, like Loomis and Morrill, which were both about algorithms that might have been biased. In Loomis, the defendant was arguing that this risk assessment tool used for sentencing was actually biased against certain groups.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So it's like this back and forth, right? This kind of legal tug of war. On one side, you have the need for transparency, making sure everything is fair. But on the other side, you have these companies wanting to protect their technology. This Bank of America case could really change things one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a delicate balance, and this case could definitely tip the scales. Yeah, it could really set a precedent.
It sounds like we're on the edge of a legal revolution. But let's step back for a minute and talk about what all this means for the average person.
Yeah.
Like imagine signing a contract and later finding out that, oh, hey, an AI was behind this whole thing. What should people be aware of?
I think awareness is key. We need to be thinking about these possibilities now, even if it still feels a bit like, sci-fi.
Yeah, so what can we do? Do we need to start reading every contract with a fine-tooth comb?
Not necessarily, but it's always smart to be informed and ask questions. If you're dealing with a company that's known for using a lot of AI, like in this case with Bank of America, it might be worth specifically asking about how AI is involved in their contracts.
So should I straight up ask, hey, did a robot write this?
Well, maybe not in those exact words, but you can definitely ask about what kind of safeguards they have in place to make sure things are fair and accurate and transparent. You have the right to understand what you're agreeing to.
Right. It's all about knowing your rights and standing up for yourself. Going back to the case for a second, what are some arguments the bank might make to try and push back against this request for information about their AI?
It's pretty likely they'll say that their use of AI is proprietary, a trade secret. They might argue that giving away those details would give their competitors an unfair advantage, like exposing their secret formula or something.
Ah, the classic trade secret defense. But doesn't that kind of clash with this idea of transparency that we've been talking about, especially when it comes to AI?
It definitely creates some tension there. The bank might also say that our current contract laws are good enough, whether AI was involved or not. They could argue that as long as the terms of the contract are clear and everyone agreed to them, it shouldn't really matter how they got there.
I see their point, but it feels like things get a little messy when you bring in the possibility of AI bias or errors, right? Like what if the AI made a mistake or put something unfair in the contract because of a bias in its data? Does that mean the contract isn't valid anymore?
That's where it gets really tricky. And honestly, the courts are still trying to figure all of that out. There's no easy answer yet.
So it sounds like this whole Bank of America case could have a big impact on future cases and maybe even lead to new rules about AI and contracts.
Oh, absolutely. The court's decision could set a major precedent.
Okay, so we've got this legal battle going on, potentially huge implications for the future of contracts. But let's not lose sight of the human side of all of this. What does this mean for the person listening right now? What if you're looking at a contract and you think, maybe AI was involved here? What should you do?
That's a great question. First of all, don't panic. Just because AI might have been used doesn't automatically make a contract invalid.
Right, but it's definitely something to be aware of.
Exactly. Look closely at the terms and conditions, just like you would with any contract. If something seems unclear or confusing or unfair, don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
And what if you're dealing with a company that's known for using AI a lot, like in this Bank of America case?
Well, then it might be worth asking directly about the role of AI in their contract process. You can ask about what safeguards they have to make sure everything's fair, accurate, and transparent.
It all comes back to being informed and speaking up for yourself.
Absolutely. And remember, this whole legal landscape around AI is still changing and evolving. Cases like this one are really pushing the boundaries and making us face new challenges.
It's a pretty exciting time to be following this. Who knows what the future holds?
One thing's for sure, AI isn't going anywhere, and its impact on contract law is only going to get bigger.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the specifics of the defendant's strategy in this Bank of America case to talking about the bigger picture for AI and contract law. We really did a deep dive into this whole fascinating topic.
And we've seen how court decisions in other cases, even ones that don't seem directly related, like, remember those cases about bullet matching and DNA analysis software? Well, those could actually give us some clues about how this contract case might turn out.
It's all connected. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Could you tell the difference between a contract written by a human and one written by an AI?
That's a question we might all be asking ourselves pretty soon. And what would you do if you were in the same situation as the defendant in this Bank of America case?
Those are some important questions to consider. The line between humans and AI is getting blurrier all the time. And as we navigate this new world, we need to stay informed, ask questions, and make sure our voices are heard.
Well said. We've explored a lot today, from how the defendant is demanding more transparency about the use of AI to the broader implications for contract law and even beyond. Who knew AI could be so legally complicated?
It's definitely a rapidly developing area of the law. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and keep those brains buzzing. It really makes you think. What happens when we can't even tell what's human and what's a machine anymore?
That's what it all comes down to, right? And it goes way beyond just contracts. It's about transparency and control over this really powerful technology that's becoming such a big part of our lives.
In this case, with Bank of America, it's like a warning sign. The decisions made here could have a huge impact on how we deal with AI in all kinds of legal situations going forward.
Absolutely. This case could set a precedent for how much transparency we can expect from companies that are using AI and what rights people have to understand how AI is affecting them.
So it's not just a legal battle. It's a battle for the future of AI and what role it plays in our society.
Exactly. The real question isn't just about whether AI should be involved in contracts, but about how much control we have over this technology. The decisions made in cases like this one will really shape the future of AI and how it impacts our lives.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From the specifics of what the defendant is trying to do in this Bank of America case to the bigger implications for contract law, and even beyond that. Who knew AI could be so legally complex?
It's a rapidly developing area of law, that's for sure, and it's only going to become more complex and more important as AI continues to evolve.
That's for sure. So to wrap up our deep dive today, here's something I want you to think about. The next time you're signing a contract online, in person, wherever, take a minute and just think, could AI have been involved in creating this? And if so, am I okay with that? The answer might surprise you. Thanks for joining us, and keep asking those tough questions.